Thank you. Well, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to, both virtually and in person, to our first US presidential election session for 2024. Hopefully today we will help you make a bit of sense of everything that's happened and everything that may continue to happen. First, some basics about the American political system. One, voting is not, it's important to remember, voting is not compulsory. It's also, it's all about getting out the vote. Secondly, fundraising and the money is critical, very important. So it's also all about the money. And in fact, one of the great matters that prompted Joe Biden to get out of the race recently was because a lot of key Democratic donors said, we're not going to donate any more money with you continuing to be the candidate. Thirdly, and this is very important, it's all about the states. The general election is being held on Tuesday, the 5th of November, and it's an election for each state's delegates to a body called the Electoral College. So it's all about, there are 538 Electoral College votes, and 270 is the magic number therefore. And each of the states has a number of electoral votes based upon its population. And there's a decentralized election system. So what that means is that there are in effect 51 separate elections, one election for each of the states, and the District of Columbia, DC, also gets Electoral College votes. It gets the same number of Electoral College votes as the lowest number of votes attributed to a state, that is 3 votes. Now, in terms of the election, what I've put together is a map of the Electoral College votes since, and the Electoral College changes since 2000. The blue states are the Democrat states, the red states are the Republican states, and the beige in between are states which have shifted. So the blue states have always been Democrat since 2000. The red states always been Republican. And the only states that have moved in that period are those 193 Electoral College votes in the beige. Now, there would be even less of those other than for the fact that in the 2020 election, Arizona and Georgia went from Republican to Democrat for the first time in that period. So looking in terms of the states and the election in the states, in 2020, Joe Biden won the Electoral College vote by 306 to 232. Notwithstanding, he won the popular vote by a margin of approximately 7 million and a greater percentage. But when it boils down to it, you'll see that Biden won 4 states and a district, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, and the 2nd district in Maine, by a grand total of approximately 65,000 votes. So what that means in terms of the 2020 numbers is that it was actually a very close election, in that if just over 30,000 votes had changed sides, then Trump would have got a 2nd term rather than Biden being elected. And so what that means is that the election is not determined in the big states of California and New York, but it's determined in the states where the Electoral College votes are up for grabs, namely the swing states. And the 2024 swing states, and this is open to debate, but I've allocated them as Pennsylvania, Michigan, essentially some Rust Belt states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Virginia. And then they're states in essentially the mid and Midwest. And then Sun Belt states, which are states in the south of Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. Now, there are some key dates, and there are key dates both before and after today. The key dates were on the 7th of June this year, there was the fateful presidential debate in Atlanta, Georgia. 13th of June after that, shortly after, there was the assassination attempt on Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania. From the 15th 15th to the 18th of July, that was last week, there was a Republican convention. Then, as you all know, last Sunday, Joe Biden announced his withdrawal. The Democratic convention is scheduled for Chicago, Illinois, from the 19th to the 22nd of August. There's a scheduled second presidential debate on ABC on the 10th of September. But interestingly, until this election, the debates had all been organised through a body known as the Presidential Debates Commission. And it's a bipartisan commission to organise presidential debates. However, this year, both the candidates bypassed the Presidential Debate Committee and organised their own debates. This was the two debates, the first one on the 27th of June and the second scheduled one on the 10th of September. Donald Trump is now saying that he wants to debate Kamala Harris repeatedly, and he's happy to do it. But whatever he's prepared to do, he thinks that because the deal he previously did was with Biden and the Biden camp, all bets are off on that. And he doesn't want to have a debate on ABC. He wants to have a debate on Fox News. So there will be a bit of skirmishing, but I suspect there will be at least one other debate. Early voting, that is postal and absentee voting, as we would call it, commences on 20 September 2024. 5 November is the big date, that's election day. And then 20 January 2025 is when the president is inaugurated. Now, I thought it was probably worthwhile showing you a little footage of the debate because that was so and proved so pivotal. So I'll have a look at this footage.
Now, please welcome the 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Folks, how are you? Great to be here. Thank you.
And please welcome the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. Excuse me, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death.
Since I've changed the law, what's happened? I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. It's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of this. I don't think he knows what he said either.
I was recently in France for D-Day, and I spoke all about those heroes that died. I went to the World War II cemetery, World War I cemetery he refused to go to. He was standing with his 4-star general, and he told me, he said, I don't want to go in there because they're a bunch of losers and suckers. My son was not a loser, was not a sucker. You're the sucker. You're the loser. The crimes that you are still charged with. And think of all the civil penalties you have. How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give you a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star. He can't hit a ball 50 yards. He challenged me to a golf match. He can't hit a ball 50 yards.
Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bags.
Let's not act like children.
President Trump, we're going to turn.
Let's not act like children.
You are a child.
Anyway, so that probably gives you a good idea why we're in or partly why we're in the situation we're in. One of the other pivotal events was, of course, the Trump assassination attempt. Trump said at his convention speech would be the only time he raised the subject. It just took him just 3 days to raise it again at a rally. But here's an excerpt of what he said about it during his convention speech.
I'm not supposed to be here tonight. Not supposed to be here.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Thank you. But I'm not. And I'll tell you, I stand before you in this arena only by the grace of Almighty God. In watching the reports over the last few days, many people say it was a providential moment. Probably was. When I rose surrounded by Secret Service, the crowd was confused because they thought I was dead, and there was great, great sorrow. I could see that on their faces as I looked out. They didn't know I was looking out. They thought it was over. But I could see it. I wanted to do something to let them know I was okay. I raised my right arm, looked at the thousands and thousands of people that were breathlessly waiting, and started shouting, "Fight, fight, fight." Thank you.
Note the tears in the eyes of some of the audience, and note the image of Trump bloodied, fist in the air, American flag in the background projected onto the screens behind him. Now, I went through the process and put out a slide with the process of selecting a new Democratic nominee. Most of the material on this slide is pretty much moot now because Kamala Harris has commitments from over 50% of the pledged delegates. She would need to get the nomination. This was largely achieved through separate meetings of state delegations agreeing to allocate their votes to her. The main issue now is whether there's going to be a virtual nomination. Ohio has a requirement that nominations must be received by the 7th of August. The Ohio legislature has amended the law to extend this time, but that law will only come into effect on 1 September. As a precaution, the Democratic Party had decided to have a virtual vote to nominate Biden ahead of the 7th of August deadline. The committee is meeting today, US time, to decide what to do about that. My guess is they probably will go ahead with a virtual vote. So I don't need to tell you anything about the candidates. I don't need to tell you anything about Donald Trump. I'm sure you all know probably more than you'd want to know about him. But Kamala Harris is probably a little unknown to many of you. Her parents were academics. Her mother is Indian. Her mother was Indian. Her father is Jamaican. She will turn 60 in October. Fun fact, her husband, Doug Emhoff, was a partner of DLA Piper until she became vice president. So if you're dealing with DLA Piper partners, you might like to ask them of their dealings with Doug. He's the first Jewish spouse of a presidential candidate for a major party since Mike Dukakis's wife, Kitty, in 1988. Kamala Harris had a career as a public prosecutor and in public prosecution as a San Franciscan district attorney and then Californian attorney general before being elected to the Senate in 2017. She started her career as the product of the San Francisco Democrat Party machine and even dated one of its leaders, then San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown, in the 1990s. She unsuccessfully ran for president in the 2020 election. While she started with a fanfare, generating a record amount of fundraising on her first day, she faded badly and dropped out even before 2020 commenced in late 2019. One of the issues that dogged her campaign was that she was seen as too much of a law and order candidate and insufficiently progressive on criminal justice issues for the Democratic Party of the time. She was chosen by Joe Biden as his vice presidential candidate after he'd announced that his selection would be a black woman. As vice president, she's been given responsibility for working with South American nations to curb the flow of immigrants and develop a long-term solution. She has also been a strong and effective pro-choice advocate in the aftermath of the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. And I have no doubt our panellists will be saying a lot more about her as we get into the panel discussion. Now, I put up some polls. These polls were really this morning's figures from the Real Clear Politics poll aggregation site. You can see the numbers for yourselves. They're probably, there's an argument they're potentially moot in light of the change in the Democratic candidate. But you see, they don't even have battleground polls for Trump v. Harris. It's only still Trump v. Biden, and you can see Trump was leading a long way in those battleground states before Biden pulled out. And then finally, for those of you who are interested in US politics, I just thought I'd give you some reference sources, and those sources are set out there. New York Times is very comprehensive, but I think you should be conscious that it does have a liberal pro-Democrat perspective, and that sometimes comes across in even some of their news and factual articles. I think Politico and Axios are more objective, and also for those of you who would want to do this, they're not, unlike the New York Times, they're not currently behind paywalls. The book on Biden and Obama gives good background behind the current state of the Democratic Party that I've listed. And then finally, in terms of two television programs, Planet America is a weekly program on the ABC that's slightly wonky, but gives interesting, relatively detailed analysis of events. And I said Vice, it's actually Veep. I apologise for that. Veep is a political satire series about a presidential candidate who was badly defeated, seemingly without principles and caught up in the political game, who is chosen as vice president and then becomes president following the resignation of the president. Apart from the obvious parallels of life imitating art to the current situation, in 2021, in late 2020, Politico ran an article describing the Veepiest moments of the Trump era. So that should be Veep, not Vice. But anyway, now on to the panel discussion. We're very honoured to have our two panellists, and particularly honoured to have Kim Beazley, who's on the line, who's in our Perth office. Kim is really what can be described as a true statesman. He has a CV that is so impressive I can't even go through all of it with you, but the highlights are that he is a former federal minister, including having been Minister for Defence. He's a former federal opposition leader. He was Australian ambassador to the USA and was more recently Governor of Western Australia. So I'd like you to welcome Kim. And our other panellist, Jared Monshine, a lot younger and so therefore probably less appointments, but he's very eminent in that he's Director of Research at the US Study Centre at the University of Sydney and is largely responsible for their polling. So I'd like you to welcome Jared as well. So, Jared and Kim, this last month has arguably been the most consequential single month in any US presidential election, beginning with the candidates' debate which led to the whole process of the Democrats questioning Joe Biden's candidacy. In the middle of that, then the Trump assassination, then Donald Trump's selection of J.D. Vance as his running mate, and then finally the Republican convention, followed by Joe Biden's withdrawal as the Democratic candidate. I'm almost getting breathless going through those events. Kim, I'd like to ask you how you think the last month's events are going to impact the election, and which of these events has been of the greatest significance?
Well, I think obviously the withdrawal of Joe Biden has been the greatest significance. It completely changed the race from being a race between the incumbent and Trump. It's now, she's not a new candidate because she's vice president, but there's a totally different dynamic. And in a funny way, not a funny way, in a quite extraordinary way, the entirety of the Republican convention has been rendered irrelevant. that was totally focused on abusing Biden and on introducing JD Vance. And now all the punchlines, all the histrionics, all of it was aimed, as it turns out, at the wrong person. And so she's reset. I'd have to say now, Jared would know a lot more about this. He's great on polling. But I think Biden went because of the polling information that was given him, which suggested to him that there was no joy in any of what you might call the marginal states that won the election for him previously. He's way behind. But there are about half a dozen to 10 Democrat states, normally leaning Democrat, that appeared to be up for grabs or is behind in, and the momentum was with Trump. So I think they told him very directly that he was over. And he decided at that point of time that he would leave the race, very belatedly. But I know a lot of people say that would put the Democrats at some disadvantage. In this case, I think not. In this case, I think there's about the right amount of time for the new candidate to present herself, and she's not a completely unknown quantity. I'd say this about the events of this last week or so, that if this had been foreseen and that Kamala Harris was going to be the opponent, I think it's quite likely that Trump would not have selected Vance. And that would have been you'd have gone a bit more securely, a bit more to reaching out. Vance is doubling down on the MAGA agenda. I'm told by some friends that Trump was not at all pleased with Vance's speech at the convention, which I thought was, given all the circumstances, a pretty reasonable one. But it was about Vance, and with occasional mentions of Trump. And Trump would only be comfortable with something that was virtually completely about him. So it set up an interesting race, but it's basically Trump's race to lose.
Did you, just following that up, did you really think that the Republicans thought that Biden would continue to be would continue to be on the ticket when they in the lead up to the convention? I was certainly, from my own perspective, by the time of the Republican convention, I pretty much thought it was a question of when, not if, Biden would leave the ticket.
Well, I've got to say, I was of the view last year that Biden would not be on the ticket, that Biden would take seriously his undertaking to be a transitional president, and that he'd have let a normal Democrat nomination process or primary process proceed. He didn't. And therefore, I think that there would have been a view amongst the Republicans that this guy was dug in. It's certainly an unusual time to retire from the race. I mean, other presidents have done it before. Johnson and Truman come to mind, but way in advance, not in the aftermath of one of the two conventions. So I think Trump thought he was pretty secure, pretty safe, A, that he was going to win, and B, he probably thought that the assassination attempt augmented that, and B, what he wanted his second term to be about was a consolidation of the MAGA agenda, which they've got a model of in a thing called Project 2025, and that he would be able to pass that agenda on to a true believing successor in Vance. All of a sudden, he finds himself confronted with an outreach task, a reach beyond my base ranks. That's going to take him a bit of working.
Jared, how did the Democrats get into this position then?
It's a great question. I think they were asking themselves that a week ago. I'll just say a few things. You've covered so much, and there's so much to talk more about. But I think I just want to make a few big points in terms of where the Democrats are. First, I'll address that. A week ago, the Democrats were fighting depression. There's no better way to say it. They were unbelievably morose and frustrated that this very proud and accomplished Irish man was refusing to step down. And they were beside themselves. And Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, every single Democrat was going to Biden quietly saying, get the hell out of here. You're done. It's over. And he was not moving. And so then they started to turn up the heat a bit more. And they started to leak to the media saying he needs to get out. He's done. There's no more. And then more and more and more Democrats were going public. And so it was just inevitable. But with that said, we are in a very different race now. I think there's a lot of, we should note that Americans were not excited about this race whatsoever. In 2020, we set in the US, I'm American, when I say we, it's as an American. I'm still not an Australian citizen because your paperwork's way too complex. So I'll get there eventually. But in the US, we were looking in the polling world at what we call double haters. They hated Biden and they hated Trump. And we were basically trying to figure out who do they hate a bit less. I wish that weren't the case, but that's exactly what the case was. In 2024, we're projected just a week ago to again break records on the on voter participation, but probably the opposite direction, because all America, a majority of Americans did not want these two people, and majority of Americans were disinterested in voting for either of them. So it was really, it was a level of negative partisanship I've never seen in America, where no one wants anything to do with anyone. Now we're in a completely different ballgame. The number of undecided voters in America, how can you be undecided about Donald Trump and Joe Biden, right? Like, you know how you feel about them at this point, right? Even Australians know how you feel about them at this point. But the number of undecided voters now has increased from 2% just 2 weeks ago to 9%. 30% of female voters in America are actually undecided about the election. I haven't seen that many undecided voters in years. In terms of fundraising, you mentioned this, and I think fundraising, especially in a presidential race, is overrated, because what are you spending on? Ads? We know how we feel about Biden or Trump, right? Like, we know what their messages are. We know the negative messages we're going to get on this. But actually, it's really important for Kamala Harris, because she's not a known character. That fundraising, those ads, that messaging is huge for her right now, because she still is not very well known. Yes, she's the vice president, but no one really knows what she stands for just yet. And on the reverse ticket, J.D. Vance, I think Kim said it perfectly. It was a doubling down of the MAGA agenda, and it really spoke to just how confident Trump was in defeating Joe Biden. It couldn't have been an easier target for Trump to take on, a Joe Biden who his staffers cringed every time he got on stage. There's great videos of the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense. They have videos of them. It's so sad that the media knew to do this, but they would shoot videos of them while the Biden was speaking and try to catch all the grimaces that they were making when Biden spoke. It was painful, right? But Trump was so confident that he said, no, I'm going to go double down on MAGA for a guy who, I can't stress this enough, is not that impressive of a politician. He won the state of Ohio in the Senate race by 2 percentage points. Do you know what the Republican governor of Ohio won the state by? Double digits. The attorney general, double digits. He underperformed in Ohio. He is not someone who's particularly remarkable, and he doesn't reach out to any of the segments of the voter electorate that he needs to: women, suburban voters, non-white voters. Like, Trump just doubled down, and it really was, I think, the best news story for the Democrats in weeks. Beforehand, it was only one terrible thing after another, whether it be the assassination or the debate or Biden getting COVID. It was one thing after another. And then Trump did announce J.D. Vance as his running mate, which I think was a political malpractice on his part, firstly. And then he also, you showed a clip of it, of his RNC speech, which for 10 to 15 minutes we saw outside of Trump we haven't seen for a long time. Humble, actually earnestly, seemingly evoking God and stuff. Even though, let's not talk about like what sort of religious meaning it means for someone in the audience to die, but Trump doesn't. That's beside the point. The fact, though, that he changed tact was remarkable. But then after that 10 to 15 minute speech, he did about 80 minutes of a stump speech. He mailed it in. Anyone who's watched any of his stump speeches before knew all those talking points. He did not say anything new. But that just shows you how much he thought the election was in the bag. And so he's like, all right, I'll just play my greatest hits. Here we go. And that's what he did. He doubled down on the MAGA, and then he played his greatest hits, and that because he thought the election was in the bag. But now we're in a completely different race. And so where the Democrats find themselves now is they have, in many ways, what I think is the anti-Hillary Clinton. I don't know anyone. Our job at the USA Center is to sort of explain America to Australia, but also we host a lot of congressional delegations, we host a lot of staff delegations, and we go to DC all the time, talk to the White House, talk to Congress, everything. I don't know anyone who has ever met Hillary Clinton, done a briefing with her, and come away from that meeting like with anything but respect. She is exceptionally talented, an amazing policymaker with amazing insight. I think she was also an exceptionally terrible politician. Honestly, she's just not a very good politician. I think we have the reverse with Kamala Harris. She is a good politician. She has performed so well, whether it be in her as a member of the Senate, cross-examining basically Trump administration Supreme Court nominees, or whether it be her amazing launch for her 2020 presidential campaign, or whether it be on the debate stage when she actually took on Joe Biden and came away with the most viral moment of the Democratic presidential debates. She has performed well. That's the thing, though. She has performed well. It's not clear to me that she has the substance, though. That's the thing. Behind closed doors, as we know as a politician, it's one thing to make speeches. It's one thing to have a viral moment. It's another thing altogether to make the right decisions behind closed doors. And time again, I don't know anyone who has had a briefing with her and come away with a ton of respect. If anything, they come away with a lot more questions. So now we're having a question where, can she define herself and make the right decisions behind closed doors, including getting the right running mate to actually do more than just perform well, but to actually do well?
Well, actually, let's go to Kamala Harris. Kim, what do you see as her strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I think a strength is that she is hard and mentally disciplined and pointed, and she would be a nasty person to have to debate with. He'd need, to debate with her, Trump would need a full MAGA audience at Fox cheering and raging for him, or she would cut him to ribbons. I mean, really cut him to ribbons. And unlike Joe or probably most Democrat politicians, she wouldn't let him get away with a single lie, a single exaggeration. It would be a hard performance. That's the first thing. The second thing is she does the Biden agenda, or the Biden achievement is not insubstantial. I mean, the Republicans say you expect, lie and exaggerate about it. That's politics. And there's a lot of people in the US who feel that even though they were well served, they don't believe they were. But nevertheless, she doesn't really have to argue around a set of policies that she's carries in part responsibility for. So that's pretty easy to answer and get to the main point. Her weakness is basically she has to break so many ceilings. That's going to be a really tough ask. And you can see the Republicans going around saying that she's a product of minority favouring laws and uplift type laws. And for that's their code for people of colour. But it could also be dangerously for them, a code for women. And if in the public mind it becomes them saying things about women, that's going to be very dangerous for them. I don't think it's going to be very good for them if they think that they're referring to minorities as well. But nevertheless, it's a ceiling unbroken because nobody's done it. And she would be an extraordinary outcome of the contemporary American political process if she got there. So we're talking here about political strengths and weaknesses. I also think that from what I know of her, and I don't know her, but from what I do, she has a very disciplined mind, and she thinks a lot and watches things a lot, and she can get quite irascible when she thinks she's being poorly advised. But she often has reason to feel irascible because she probably is being poorly advised. So, but she's an unknown quantity, and the Republicans are a long way ahead.
Jared, Kim mentioned that she wouldn't necessarily be constrained by all of Biden's policies and the Biden administration in that sense. Do you think we're likely to see differences in policies, issues and emphases from the approaches taken by Joe Biden, and what are they likely to be?
Definitely, yeah, and continuing with that anti-Hillary Clinton thing, Hillary Clinton would, if she were elected president in 2016, would have come to office after having spent a number of years as Secretary of State in the Obama administration. So she knew exactly where she stood on issues. In many ways, more comfortable with foreign policy issues than with domestic issues. Again, reversed with Kamala Harris. Far more comfortable with domestic policy issues than with foreign policy issues. But in terms of where she differs from the Biden administration, again, I can't emphasize enough that she's new and she hasn't done a ton of a ton of foreign policy stuff. But what we do know is that she was more on the progressive side when it came to Israel and Gaza. She wanted, she was one of the first to call for a ceasefire there far sooner than anyone else in the Biden administration. I think also on trade, she is more closer to Catherine Tai than she is maybe a Kirk Campbell. And that's sort of inside baseball to say she's more protectionist than she is free trade. So I think she is, what we saw in the last 3.5 years of the Biden administration is it's remarkable how few leaks there are compared to the Trump world, where there were leaks literally every few hours at times. And why do you leak in the media? It's because there's so much fighting and they can't decide what they want. And if the principal doesn't do what you want, then you leak to try to get the principal to do what you want, pressure them, et cetera, all these games. We're barely seeing that in Biden world. At least we hadn't been until the last month after his debate performance, and they were starting to leak against him. If Harris wins, I sincerely doubt we're going to see the same level of division on trade that we have seen in the Biden administration, where there have been a few leaks on trade because of those fights. She is, I think, more decided on trade than Joe Biden in terms of she is all in for the sort of protectionism, no more market access type of trade engagements overseas. So I think trade and the Middle East in particular, she's pretty clearly has her own views, but on Europe, on NATO, no question, she's completely aligned with Biden on that. On China and on Australia, completely aligned. I don't think we'll see any surprises there. But then I think the bigger changes will probably be more on the domestic side of things, where you can see she is far more comfortable talking about abortion than a practicing Catholic President Joe Biden, unsurprisingly. And so she has been out front and has really, that's been one of the top issues for this race for the Democrats. The more they talk about abortion, the better it is. Whereas on the reverse side, the Republicans and Trump will say the more they talk about inflation and immigration, the better it is for them. Negative partisanship is just deciding what they talk about the most.
And before we leave her specifically, you both talked about J.D. Vance and the Trump vice presidential choice. what do you think of who do you think her presidential choice is likely to be, and will it matter?
Him go.
Look, it does matter, yes. She's got a chance to make up ground in a couple of states which are of significance. I think it might be a bit of a toss-up between Andy Bashir. He was always my back last year when we were talking about candidates who might emerge with Biden stepping down much earlier. I was always had a bit of a flag out there for Andy Bashir because he comes from essentially a southern state and he hangs on to it by his fingernails. But Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, he is a noted American figure. As an astronaut, as the husband of a congresswoman on whom, it was a murder attempt more than you would call it assassination. This fellow went in and rampaged with a gun, and she was one of the victims of it. But that would be a big opportunity in Arizona for the ticket. There's the governor of North Carolina as a distinct possibility too, I think. But there are a couple of others. I don't think Shapiro, though he'd be the most incisive, I think, of the various governors and senators who could contribute to the race. But the good thing for Kamala is she's got a wealth of choice. And pretty well, for one reason or other, most of the potential
see very likely a male vice president and very likely a white one. Now, if the issue that I think Kim is really perfectly touching on is you want a vice president who can help carry one of those swing states. If you get a Democrat like Shapiro from Pennsylvania, that is a Democratic governor who has already won, in my view, the most important swing state of Pennsylvania. And so if she gets him on the ticket, they would somehow have to change their tune about whether the Pennsylvania voters, about whether they want to vote for someone who they already voted for in the past. So I think more than anything else, that's why I'm paying a close attention to who she picks. I will say who she's had, the person who's leading VP vetting for her is Eric Holder, who's the Attorney General in the Obama administration. And he, I think, is a bit more partisan. So I'm hoping, though, that they can be more strategic than perhaps the Trump campaign was in their VP pick. And we all know Trump doesn't really do strategy. I think a very sidebar note on this, that was not a MAGA RNC we just saw. That was a Trump RNC convention, that we just saw. There's no way, like we all know, like JD Vance will be the MAGA heir. He is a proper MAGA guy through and through. But there is no way that at a MAGA Republican National Convention with JD Vance at the top of the ticket, you'd ever have someone like Amber, what's her name? The woman, anyways, she is an OnlyFans star who led the LA slut walk and is all about pro-choice. This is a uniquely Trump RNC, right? This is not a MAGA RNC. So it's really important to highlight the difference between, yes, JD Vance is MAGA through and through, but that is not synonymous with Trump. We should not make that synonymous with Trump.
But that's actually a good segue, because what I think you're alluding to is the fact that Trump has tried to smooth out the Republicans' position on abortion, because it's abortion and the repeal of Roe v. Wade has proved very electorally damaging to the Republicans since Roe v. Wade was overturned. I'll start with you, Kim. What are the big issues, and what are the issues that are likely to turn the electors in this election?
Well, look, I think abortion has suddenly become an even more significant issue because it now has a Roe v. Wade advocate in Kamala Harris, who knows a lot about it, feels it viscerally, and is very happy to take on any particular Republican in a debate on the subject. So I think that becomes more pointed. Then there's immigration. Now, the question will be, is she a sufficiently skilled prosecutor of the case to bring into the centre, because it's a real hot button issue in the US, to bring into the centre the Trump's vetoing of what was a bipartisan solution, a real solution, and say, why are you criticising us on all these numbers, and take a look at what you've done. You were prepared to have that border open in your mind in order to get yourself elected. Now, that's not an easy sell, but it's a sell she can do quite easily. Overriding, though, not overriding, but there in the mix, is how Americans feel about whether or not they're better off. And they are, objectively, better off. Do they feel it? No, they don't. And this is a problem in much of the Western world at the moment, that people may be objectively better off, but it is very hard for them to feel it. So that is how you get on the right side of the issues around those things that make people feel better off. That's going to be an important issue in the course of the election. Trump always sells himself as a man who made a lot of money, and therefore, naturally, you just need to attach yourself to his coattails and it'll all drop on you. And that's folk don't necessarily approach it with a higher level of sophistication. One of the big differences between the US and us is this. There's very little that descends on you from the federal government in your personal day-to-day activities. In the case of Australia, everything descends on you from the federal government. Your education money, your university money, your universal health care, and so on. You can go through a whole raft of them. None of those things emanate from the federal government in the US. So working families don't get much one way or another out of who emerges in the national government. In Australia, they do. I think are you better off is always a substantial question at election time, and it probably certainly helps Harris that she's not Biden.
Can I just add?
Sure.
I think it's really important to note the founding stories of Australia and the US, and that the US was literally founded on a bloody revolution against government, compared to Australia, which sort of started existing on its own, and does not exactly have a long history of militias uprising against the government in the same way. on the whole, I think the states, I've given the states, and should we throw out the polling? Yes. We should also stop looking at the national polls. It's completely useless to point at who's winning or losing in national polls. That's inconsequential. I want the state by state polls only, because that's the only thing that matters is the Electoral College. And again, another thing, the corpse of Joe Biden was still at 43%. Like, that tells you about where America is in its politics, right? Like, he was barely with it and he was still getting 43%. So this is not going to be a landslide in either direction. We really need to look at the key swing states and where those undecided voters are. And we should not think of undecided voters as people who really want to understand where, like, interest tax rates are on the most complex arcane. No, it is working parents who are not, they're low information, not low IQ. They just have better things to go on, and they get their media from their friends and family, and they it's like a vibe check, right? And it's not really like detailed policy platforms that are going to decide this election.
Two further questions. I know we're running out of time, so I'd like you both to answer them quickly. One, what do you think Trump and his supporters will do if Trump loses the election? Two, is there an issue with Biden's state and potential cover-ups, and will that potentially implicate Kamala Harris as his vice president? And three, because it is closing.
Okay.
If each of you is, if either of you is, or either or both of you are prepared to give a prediction as to the outcome, we'd all be very interested in that too. So, Kim, can I start with you, and then?
Oh, thanks. Well, very quickly, when you replay this program and get it into your head, Jared's last answer is all you need. That is a very good summary of where the position actually is. And what the difference is now is the states that he summarised are the states that will determine the outcome. Frankly, 2 weeks ago, they would be virtually irrelevant because they'd be picking up Democrat states and the rest of it. But we're now back to that, courtesy of the change in the Democrat leadership. Look, I really want Kamala to win. I'd have to say if the vote was held at this moment, she probably wouldn't. But the question is, that's why I say this is Trump's election to lose. But he may well do that, and I certainly hope so.
First question, if Trump loses, what does he do? I think it's more important to ask, in my view, what do both sides do if they lose? January 6th was not the first time that there were a lot of politicians questioning the outcome of the election. Hillary Clinton did. And there were a number of Democratic members of Congress who wanted to not certify Trump's election win. Obviously, they did not engage in an insurrection, but I wouldn't underestimate the passion on both sides at this point. Yes, the MAGA base is very passionate, but the anti-Trump base is also very passionate. Your second question, remind me?
Second question was Biden's infirmity and a potential.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a reason why the media coverage turned on Biden so quickly after the debate. And that was not only because the media was really angry for being gaslit by his advisors, but also Biden's own team was. There were people in the cabinet, there were people in the White House administration who did not know Biden's decline was that bad. They were just told over and over again, stop being ageist, he's fine, he's with it. And he clearly was with it a few years ago, 2020, 21, 2022. But in 2023, things started to change. And that's why it's really interesting in terms of those of us who know elderly folks, and how when the decline happens, when you live with them every day, you don't notice it as much. But when you see them over only snapshots over a period of time, that's when you start to tell. And I think that's what happened, is that those around him, his very increasingly insular inner circle, had only seen him every day and didn't even notice how bad it had gotten, whereas the rest of us who hadn't were shocked by it. Now, who wins? I think Kim nailed it. It really, at this point, Trump wins, but I don't think it really matters, because you should ask me in 3 weeks. We have the next 3 weeks to see how Harris defines herself, and whether she can finally do more, like I said before, than just perform in front of a camera, but actually make the right choices, make the right VP choice, and make the right platform, make the right speeches. It's not just performing for a camera, but actually having some substance.
Well, that's a perfect segue into the end of this segment. it means that we all have to come back for yet another session before the election. So we'd like you to do that. But in the meantime, can you please thank our two panelists? Well, thanks. Okay.
Thanks for having us, and good to see you, Jared.
Thanks very much, Kim.